I think that if someone is sitting here listening right now and saying, well, I don't know that I need to invest in my personal brand, and Seth and Mel, I don't think you're going to convince me. My question back to you is, do you want to continue to be employed?
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your Monday morning energizer covering insights and trends in higher ed marketing and enrollment. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing over 15 years of ed tech and marketing expertise to your earbuds.
And I'm Seth Odell, joining the Pulse with my own adventures from leading marketing at top universities to founding Kanahoma, one of the industry's fastest growing digital marketing agencies.
Each week, we bring you the kind of insider insights you typically only find over cocktails with your pals at a conference.
It's fast, it's fun, and it's designed for you, the busy higher ed professional.
You're not just listening to another podcast.
You're checking the pulse of higher education.
Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. All right, welcome back. Oh my gosh, that intro music, it's still just hitting in the right way, I gotta say.
It brings the energy.
Sometimes I just listen to our podcast so I can listen to the intro music. Can I admit it? It's fine.
That's awesome.
How's it going, Seth?
It's going great, Mallory. Feeling really good, energized today. But how are you? I feel like you got a lot going on.
Seth, today has been crazy, but in such a good way. We actually announced this morning that our Engage Summit, which is taking place in Raleigh later this month, we are going to be live streaming the entire summit, and it is at no cost to anyone who wants to come. Yeah, we're super excited that we can offer this again this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so great. I unfortunately, as you know, I can't make it. I have a family commitment. So I am super pumped. That's great. I will 100% be tuning in for the whole thing. That's so great. I didn't realize you all are doing that.
I am super excited. Many of our Enrollify colleagues are presenting at the summit this year. And so all of their sessions will be live streamed and recorded. And our closing keynote is included in that too. And that's Jeff Salingo. And I gotta say, that's one of the highlights on the agenda for me this year.
That's awesome.
Yes. So folks, run, don't walk. I'll drop the link in our show notes to make it super easy, but anybody can sign up for this live stream. And like I said, we're recording it too. So even if you can't come to the full event virtually, you will get all of the recordings. So yay.
That's awesome. Great news. Love it. Good way to start the week.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this week, Seth and I are talking about personal branding. So we're going to tackle this topic. This was inspired by an HBR article that hit my inbox, actually at this point, a couple weeks ago. But that article also in the show notes gave some really great advice to folks who are looking to kind of maintain and update their personal brand. And Seth, it got us kind of thinking, hey, this would be a really great episode topic, because I think we both have a lot to say on this.
Yes, definitely have a lot to say. So I am here for it and ready to unpack.
All right. Well, you know what? Unpack. Don't wait for me, Seth.
Fair enough. I'll tee it up. So, I think, look, the topic of personal branding, I think, is more important than ever. And I think sometimes the conversation can fade a little bit for those of us that are further along in their career. But, I was speaking at a college class recently, giving some advice to some soon-to-be graduates. And I talked about the benefits and power of personal branding. And I think it's probably one of the most important things that people can do. And so, why is it so important, right? It's the ability to stand out in a crowded marketplace. The current employer market is more crowded than ever. It's noisier than ever. It's also really volatile. We're seeing, layoffs and folks on the job market. And, the reality is, so many jobs are coming from people and from networks and from opportunities. It's very hard to be out there and trying to get attention for your ideas if your ideas haven't seen the light of day before. And so, to me, this matters more than ever. It's incredibly valuable on a personal level. It can drive your career. And I think we'll unpack a little bit today. I think personal branding has had probably the single biggest impact on my life as far as anything I've ever done professionally, which is a pretty big statement, but I mean it. And I think it's just, more than ever, And so I think it's a great topic for us to tackle today.
I love it. I think that if someone is sitting here listening right now and saying, well, I don't know that I need to invest in my personal brand, and Seth and Mel, I don't think you're going to convince me. My question back to you is, do you want to continue to be employed? Like, for me, personal branding is all about career opportunities, both hiring and promotion opportunities. But I have had such an interesting career experience where outside of the very first job that I got out of college, which was your run-of-the-mill admissions counselor position, ever since, I have never applied to a job. I have only ever had jobs created for me. And that is the power of personal branding.
Yes. I have only applied to one job in the past 15 years. And even then it was a click to apply on LinkedIn. And I agree. I just think it's just there's so much power in it. And so this is a lot to unpack. And so, like, if it works, maybe I'll share, like, a minute on my own journey, and you can do yours a little bit more on yours. So I think it's important to unpack, like, kind of how it's worked for both of us. And then I'd love to talk about how it works today, because I feel like it's a little different if you're starting today than it was for each of us starting, a little over 10 years ago. For myself, I got into personal branding when I worked at UCLA. That was my first job in higher ed. I was essentially an entry-level media relations position. Got really lucky at the early onset of social media and doing video, but I didn't feel like my voice was heard. It was a very traditional organization where, like, tenure was the most important thing as far as like kind of your, age and experience. And so the quality of my ideas were not really being evaluated based on the breadth of my experience. And so I turned to blogging and Twitter, and that's actually where you and I met, was on Twitter. And I read a book called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk in 2009 about personal branding. And that was what's caused me to start Higher Ed Live in 2010, which was like, well, if nobody knows who I am, I can start a talk show on the internet where I bring on people who they do know, and I'll interview them and I'll learn more. And in the process, I'll share my ideas and I'll have a platform to do it. And so it's like, if no one's inviting you to a party, you can host your own. And Higher Ed Live, like, set a lot in play. Obviously, you and I have a lot of history with Higher Ed Live. And Higher Ed Live is the reason I got hired at Southern New Hampshire University. SNU set my career off on a crazy trajectory because I was able to be very early in online education. And I look through my whole career, even now, Kanahoma is, the fastest growing agency in our space. And so much of it is because I have an extremely broad network. I know a lot of people, and it all comes back to personal branding, not necessarily from any of the work I did within an individual organization or institution, but rather from the content that I shared and the thought leadership that I've provided over the past 10 or 15 years, whether that was having my own podcasting network or speaking at conferences or being very active on social media. Like, personal branding can look like a lot of different things, but without a doubt, I do not think I would be where I am today, personally or professionally, without personal branding. It's been like the thing. And if I trace it back, I always tell people it was reading Crush It in 2009 that really, like, set a lot of it in motion. And so it's been a cornerstone of my career, but I feel like it's been a cornerstone of yours too.
It has. But a couple of the things you just said, like, I want to pull out a couple nuggets because there's some takeaways just in listening to your journey.
Let's do it.
You talked about how you created your own platform. And so, most people aren't probably going to go start their own podcast.
Yeah, that's fair.
But
That's
maybe they will, or a blog or a LinkedIn newsletter or an email newsletter. Our good friend Ashley Budd has been super successful because she got very early, like, an incredible weekly email newsletter. And we'll drop the link to it in the show notes so we can send Ashley some love. But, it's such a great point. Like, create the space for you to say the things you want to say. And there's tools like LinkedIn that you can do that with, or you can go spin up your own podcast or whatever it might be. But you need to give yourself a platform to say the things you want to say. And I think that is absolutely critical to building your personal brand, of course. But then when you start saying the things you want to say, like what you just said, Seth, so much of your career, the success of your company, et cetera, has been predicated on the fact that, you've said a lot of stuff over the last decade. Well, I have to imagine not everything you've said has been right or
That's very fair.
and like any of us, like there's so much imposter syndrome. Like I'll tell you, it's like a fear for me every Monday morning when these episodes drop that somebody's going to hit my DMs and be like, holy shit, like, you're an idiot. Like it's real. And so when you put yourself out there like that, right? Like you're not always going to be right. But something you and I've talked about recently is how conflict is not actually a bad thing. And if
Totally.
you think about the tenets of storytelling, conflict is a key part of telling a good story. And so if you're becoming a content creator, whether it's on LinkedIn or a podcast or anywhere in between, to not be afraid of the conflict, because something tells me, like, where it's the old saying that no media is bad media, right? Well, maybe no conflict's bad conflict. And over the years, something tells me some of the conflict that you've inspired has actually led you to growing your personal brand and your network as a result.
That's a great point. And I think like one framework for that I've always had in my head it's popular in the tech industry is this concept called build in the open. And the idea is that like as you're doing a thing, you're talking about it. And that build in the open has been a strategy that has helped kind of minimize or quiet my own imposter syndrome. Meaning like I'm going to talk about the things I'm doing, not just the things I've done. So I'm not going to come out here and say, I am an expert. I did this thing. It's wildly successful. Here's why I know more than everybody else. I'm going to say like, here's the thing I'm doing while I'm doing it. Get people's feedback and opinions on it. It's still something I do now with Canahoma. To your point on newsletters, I have a newsletter for Canahoma. I regularly talk about how the business is doing, the problems that we're facing, the things that we're dealing with. And it's like the more transparent you are, I find that the more people are interested and the less they feel like you're trying to say you're an expert in all things. And so, yeah, it's like sort of a fallacy that you have to know everything. To me, it's understanding what you have to say. And then it's also deciding how you would like to say it. Like I did a lot of video early in my career because I was a terrible writer for a while. And so I felt like video was easier for me and I was a better speaker. And so I started in video and I kind of moved to writing as I matured professionally. But that's like, okay, well, what do you like? Short form content, long form content, newsletters, do you want videos? Like what do you want to do? It can be your choice. Or do you just even want to engage with other people and like engage with their content? So yeah, understanding what you want to say, how you'd like to say it, and finding a way to do it in a manner that makes you confident, I think all are great pieces of advice for folks that are on their own personal journey with personal branding.
Yeah. One of the pieces of advice, one of the things that kind of kicked off my journey, it was around just getting clear on what I wanted to be known for. Like, what did I want to attach my personal brand to? And I actually remember going through a little exercise with myself and right, like what are the adjectives that when somebody sees my name come through a proposal submission, they see my name and then they think these words. Or as I back in the day was running my own little website and blog, right, like those words became the themes for the content that I was creating. And so I decided very early on that I wanted to attach my horse to the cart of innovation. And so really tried to follow threads and kind of luckily stumbled into a time when social media was on the rise. There weren't a lot of people in roles on campuses running social media for the entire institution. And I was fortunate that I was in one of those positions very early on. But don't get me wrong, it was also intentional that I moved into that role, which was created for me because I advocated for it, because I knew, I had a feeling that this was going to become a very important channel for communication. And I saw the innovation that was happening in social media. And I was like, that's the train I wanted to be on. And felt the same way when responsive web design came around and influencer marketing came around and now artificial intelligence. And so in some ways, like I just have this passion for things that are new and interesting. I like to be an early adopter. I like to learn, and I like to be self-taught. So all these new topics, these new things that people are still figuring out, I like to also help people. I like to help other people figure things out. So for me, it was around innovation and helping people. And I think, anyone who knows me, if a listener here is, if we're friends, like I would hope that those are some of the impressions that you've taken away in your interactions with me, because I've actually worked really hard to curate that as my personal brand.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Understanding your area of expertise, either where it currently is or where you'd like it to be. I think that is so important. I think a lot of times when people talk about personal brand, if you aim too broad, you can't really provide as much to the conversation. And so, like, I have really loved being in the education industry. Lately in the past few years, I feel like my own personal brand has grown a little bit into like other agency owners and other founders, as that's become a part of my personal chapter. But generally speaking, I have like really enjoyed being in the education space because it's an area I can provide more value. And then within that, to your point, there's areas of expertise and specific experiences we have. And so like understanding where can you provide value, I think is super important. And where can people learn from you? And where do you have interesting things to say? So like don't always aim too broad, but maybe like consider your own past experience as well as the experience you're hoping to build as things move forward. I gotta ask my big question, if we can move to it, is like, but what's personal branding like today? Because like I feel like I built my career off Twitter and that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it does, but come on, as far as branding. So like I would love to talk about like where do we see personal branding today? I thought your newsletter comment's really good. Newsletters, while they were around 10 years ago, were not really at all what they have been. And so I don't know, where do you see personal branding? Like what are the like bullish, bearish points of view, growing, not growing thoughts on like what platforms people should be thinking about?
Well, everybody has a podcast these days, says two people who have a podcast.
They do, right? It's true. I mean, like podcast, like 5 years ago, podcasts would be probably first and foremost still. It was just getting that resurgence. And now it's like, it's pretty crowded. So make sure you have a really unique play if you're going to have it, right?
That's right. I think that LinkedIn, though, I mean, if we're talking publicly available social networks where you are not responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the website or whatever, right? Like LinkedIn is kind of where it's at. I do not have a Mallory.com website myself. I know a lot of other folks do. I think sometimes it depends on your discipline as well. Of course, if you're a designer and you're showcasing a really beautiful portfolio and using that as part of your personal brand, that can make a ton of sense. But for someone who's just starting to get serious about personal branding and wanting to kind of like dip their toe in the water without buying domain names and, learning how to build websites or learning how to podcast, I really think LinkedIn is the place to go right now. And it's noisy, but, I think that's where a lot of folks in our space are also playing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, LinkedIn, I think, is first and foremost. I think it's crowded and it's a little bit less enjoyable for a lot of us lately, but it's more important. I think, X is obviously not there. I think at least for our industry professionally, I don't think, Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat are content platforms that make sense for us. I think folks that work in like the e-commerce space and marketing, that's a huge area for them to flex. But for us in higher ed in particular, it's not. I think LinkedIn is first and foremost. I do still am a little bullish on newsletters. I think newsletters are airing towards more mature and crowded, sort of like podcasting is today. But like I get an extreme amount of value from newsletters. One of the things I love is that, people read it and then they have a deeper conversation. And so you're not reaching the masses in the same way that I think we used to do on Twitter, but you are reaching a subset of folks. And so I think it is LinkedIn too. I totally agree. And I would also say that the other one is just like let's go old school and not forget about like conference circuits. Like I remember when, Andrew Carriega gave me my first speaking gig ever at a CASE conference. And I have spoken a lot. And I do think that like a conference platform is still a great one. And I think it's an area that really matters, is like being able to connect with other thought leaders and have something to say. So like I just think speaking in general is really good. LinkedIn is really powerful. I still think newsletters are strong. Those are probably the ones that would come to my mind first.
Conferences can be a little chicken and egg though, because it's like sometimes it feels like the folks who are being selected to speak at conferences are the people who already have invested a lot of time into their personal brand. So like what comes first?
That's true.
Yeah. And we're also like your personal brand and your network. Maybe we need to do an episode specifically on just networking, but you're swimming in the same waters, but they are two different things, but there's so much overlap. So you really can't talk about building a personal brand without also talking about building your network, because also the people in your network reflect back onto your personal brand.
Completely. And I would say that's probably my biggest point for the whole topic today is I think it's about community, not content. And I think this is all about people. When I think about personal branding and the benefits it's had, for me, it's actually the people that I know, and a lot of which I love. Like we've been in each other's lives for over a decade. We're a lot of personal friends. But, when I go on LinkedIn, like there are, really like hundreds of people that I have relationships with that I root for genuinely, that I know something about, that when I see at conferences, I'm excited to catch up. I do think that like it is relationships and it is people that is the most powerful when it comes to professional development. But the question is, where do those relationships come from? And I will say, when I think about all the relationships I've made in higher ed, content comes before most of them. And so like that personal branding, that initial introduction of I put myself out there, I had something to say, I then engaged with someone online, then we met in person and we went and got a drink at a conference, or we had dinner, and now we have a real friendship. And that real friendship has nothing to do with what I post on LinkedIn or what's in my newsletter. But when I trace it all back, it does still start with the fact that like I woke up and I decided to put myself out there. I decided to share what I knew. I decided to have conversations with people. I decided to provide value, try to learn from other folks, maybe be wrong once in a while. And so like to me, it's about chumming the waters. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. But,
we love a Gigi bark.
Gigi must have agreed. And so to me, like chum the waters and build relationships. Like people is everything, but weirdly, like you have to meet people somehow, and maybe personal branding and content online is sort of like the speed dating version of making those connections.
So I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 things people can do right now if they're
let's do it.
Yeah. So my list is going to include go audit and overhaul your LinkedIn profile, right? Like if that's the home you're welcoming people into, like make sure it's clean, put a nice photo up and all those things. Like pay attention to the little things that LinkedIn provides you, because if you spend the time and effort to tune those up, that reflects back on your personal brand positively. Then just start coming up with the topics that you have a lot of knowledge about, and maybe do your own kind of personal brand exercise. What are the 3 words that at the end of the day you want to be known for? And then as you go about your day or your week, or talking to your colleagues or your direct report, take note of the moments where you are in the teaching role and just start kind of jotting those down. Or maybe something strikes you, at 2 a.m, you've woken up and you're like, oh, this topic, I know a lot about it. That becomes a list for the things you can start to post. And then the third thing you can do is to really just start posting, like pushing your fears aside and just start posting. Like you got to start building the content. So those are the 3 things I think people can do today. Then my bonus 4th is go get the Shield app. That is Shield Analytics is a way better.
Oh, I've never used this.
Oh, it's so good. If you are spending and investing any time on LinkedIn, even if you're a premium member, their analytics are junk, and they're so like you can see like very high level stuff, and that's kind of it. And they don't even make it that easy to really do any good analysis of the content that you're posting. The Shield app, shout out to my former colleague Dan for turning me onto this. It's really terrific. So I definitely recommend it.
Love it. This is great. Well, listen, I for folks listening, I'd love also their thoughts and advice. I think we're a little further down the journey in personal branding, so I would welcome other folks' opinions on this one. So, like, find us on LinkedIn as an example, and like leave us a comment and let us know. I would just love to get people's POVs on like what's personal branding like, in 2024, and where do we need to be? Because for me, it's been the most beneficial thing I've done professionally and personally. It's brought so many great people into my life. It's brought great professional growth. It's just been extremely powerful, even though it can sound buzzwordy and stuff. It's actually been probably the single best strategy I've ever executed in my career when I really look back and try to see what drove the most value for the least amount of input.
And it's not too late, just because Seth has a 15-year head start here doesn't mean it's too late.
Never too late. Like, totally agree. And if you get started, let us know too. I'll like some stuff. I'll comment. I'm here to support.
Right on. All right. Well, Seth, they go by too quickly. It was so good to see you today. Such a fun conversation, and already looking forward to next week.
Yep. Same. Now, always great to see you, and just I hope you have a wonderful week.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks.
Take care.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.